This is my completed A Little Gratitude wallet. It's just, I've done it actually as a little wristlet here with some extra hardware and stuff. We'll go through all of that as well. But what I'm going to start working on is this little removable coin pocket. So this pattern is a little bit different still than the original gratitude wallet. So I've done a few different things other than just make it smaller. So we'll go through all of that stuff as well. But this is the little coin pocket, and this is, it just snaps open. Sometimes it takes a little bit. Sometimes I think once it gets broken in a little bit, it'll work a little better. But anyway, it works really great for being able to just put your coins in, and instead of trying to dig in with a little zipper because it gets so tiny, this way you can just open it up, pour it out, pick what you need, and away you go. As well, this the whole tutorial for these little wallets can be made different sizes depending on what your needs are. So you can use the same methods and stuff that I'm going to be showing you to make different size ones. And I have just, these are just kind of some prototypes. This one's out of leather. The red one, actually I guess all of these ones are made out of leather. And I was just kind of fooling around, and this is one that I've made out of cork. So as well. They are unlined, so they're super easy to make. So these are like about a 5-minute project. Okay, 10 minutes. So anyway, I'm going to go through how this is done. Very simple. So to make that little snap, we're going to use actually some old measuring tape. Now I've cut some off of this, so this is spring-loaded, so you don't want to unlock it and let it go, otherwise you'll have to take the whole thing apart to be able to use your tape. So you want to make sure that you lock this, so I can unlock it, pull some out, and then I'm going to lock it again so that it doesn't go in. There is really there's no rocket science to this part of it. I'm going to just take my measurement and I'm going to cut it off. Now these are like shop scissors, I call them. There's nothing fancy or expensive about them. They will get dull because you can use tin snips as well, but I'm going to be using some scissors. As a rule of thumb, you are going to cut your measuring tape 1/4 inch shorter than the width of your whatever little pouch you're going to make. So this is what I'm explaining here, is that this little pouch has many uses. So you may find that you want to make a whole bunch of them in all different sizes. So however you choose to do that, take your measuring tape, make it 1/4 inch smaller than the width of whatever pocket you're going to make. So in this case here, well, you've got the measurements in the pattern, so I'll just continue on. Now we've got kind of sharp edges here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut the very corner off, just so that there's not such a sharp corner. I'm going to do that on both of them. And as well, be careful that you don't cut yourself on the edges and stuff. It's not too bad, but I use this is like a Gorilla tape. It's like quite a heavy duct tape. And this is what I'm going to use just to kind of reinforce my edges, or just to soften the very ends. Oh yeah, this is very sticky stuff, which is good. That's what we need. And I'm just going to cut some of this off. Actually, I'm just going to cut a chunk out of here. This isn't really anything all that fancy. All I'm going to do is stick this on here. That one on there, and this over nice and tight against the edge. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim just the tape part of it off. Each edge like that. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one, and then of course I'm going to do the same thing on both ends here. So what this does is it just gives us a little bit of cushion here. Just another thing that it's going to get lots of use from pressing on here. So if this edge is really sharp, you're going to end up poking through your cork or your leather or whatever it is that you're using, your vinyl. And this just kind of helps protect that a little bit. And I'll just do the other side as well. So this, it just happens that the measuring tape that I'm using is 3/4 of an inch wide. If I had a different one, I probably, I just took this one out of the shop. It was an old one that wasn't working super well anymore, so that's why I'm upcycling it. That's it. If I went and bought a measuring tape, I probably would look for one that was maybe about 5/8 of an inch wide. Not that 3/4 is too big. Definitely 1 inch is too big. The really heavy stuff. I think when it comes to pressing this, if it was 5/8, it might be just a little bit easier to get to snap. So anyway, just something to think about. Measuring tapes are not super expensive, and especially for as much as you're going to use it for making little pockets and things like that. It's a pretty cheap piece of hardware. So anyway, I've got my two little pieces here. I'm just going to kind of set those aside for right now. This is what is going to be my little coin pocket. So if you've watched some of my other videos, I have a little kind of a trick to this. Now these are 3/4 of an inch, so I'm going to fold this over 1 inch. But when I fold things over 1 inch, instead of trying to measure and get this folded over and measure and make sure that I have an inch, really, really easy, no matter what your measurements, whatever you're hemming up, just double it. So I'm just going to put a mark at 2 inches. I'm going to do this on both sides. So then, yeah, you can see that there. I'm sure all I'm going to do is I'm going to fold that down, and that's going to give me 1 inch hem. So if you were going to use 5/8, it might be a little, you might want to take about, I would say maybe 1/4 inch off that. So then instead of 2 inches, you do with 1 and 1 3/4. The mathing is really hard these days. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do there. So I am going to go to my machine, and I'm going to sew along here, and I'm going to actually do it from the top. If you were doing fancy top stitching, then you definitely want to do it from the top, literally. Most machines, you have your better stitch is from the top, and if you have really well balanced stitches and everything, and you can't tell the difference, nobody else will be able to either. So so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my machine, and I'm going to just sew down here. I'm going to start back here, back stitch, and then go forward, back stitch, and cut. So that's my method here, and I'm going to do this at just a little over, so that I'm hitting just a little more than 3/4 of an inch. I just want just a little bit of room in this little pocket. So on this machine, I'm just going to bring you right here with me. This 20 is my 3/4 inch mark, or thereabouts. I just want to be just a little slightly over from that. So I'm just kind of positioning myself here. Boy, that's about the slowest stitching ever. Anyway, I'm trying to sew around my camera here, so that's part of the reason. So there I go. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So now once again, oh, I guess I should have shown you. So all I've done is I've just folded this in half, and I'm going to sew down one side, just one side. I have nothing in this. Here's my little pocket and stuff. I've got nothing in there. What I'm doing here is I'm lining up the top of my little pocket. I know from my own experience that 1/8 of an inch is roughly about halfway where I have things positioned, about half the thickness of this foot. So that's what I'm aiming for, is to go for 1/8 inch seam allowance here. And again, I'm going to get everything really lined up, and I'm going to put needle down, and I'm going to go back and then forward. And I'm just going to go right over top. So I'm actually, you probably can't see this, I'm just one stitch over the edge there. And now I'm going to come back forward again. And I'm sorry I'm bouncing around here a bit. So there I've got my little line of stitching down the one side. So now I have one side that is closed and the other side is still open. So this is where I'm going to insert the measuring tape into those. So I'm going to put my measuring tape in. Now we have to make sure that the curve is the right way. So when this snaps, the natural way is outward. So we want to make sure that the curve is to the outside as well. Okay, so I'm just going to slide that in. To get the piece of measuring tape right down inside there, sometimes it is helpful just to grab it with a pair of tweezers or little pliers or something like that. What we want to do is we want to get this all the way down as close in there as we can. And I'm going to put the other one in the other side as well. Just tuck that in there. There. So I got those both in quite tight. So now I can actually feel where the measuring tape is, kind of back here. So when I do this other side, this one is actually pretty good. I could take a little bit more of a seam allowance if I really wanted to, and then just trim that nice and straight to edge coat it or whatever, however you want to finish that. If you're doing leather, it's really nice to take a little bit more of a seam allowance, trim that off so everything is really perfect, and then go ahead and put some edge coat on there. So now I'm going to make sure that this lines up. You can see I'm a little bit off here, but that's okay because I am going to take a little bit more of a seam allowance. So you can see by my positioning, before my edge here was about halfway. I am taking a little bit more. I'm not going through the measuring tape, but I'm trying to get fairly close to it. So I have a bigger seam allowance. I am going to trim that off just a little bit. And because this is natural on natural, I'm not going to bother, sorry, try to get that in with more light. I'm not going to bother edge coating this. I'm just going to trim just a little bit off of here, off this one edge. So this is the second edge that I sewed. So now both of my seam allowances, actually this one is a little bit narrower than this one. I could trim this. Oh, I've got threads and stuff here too. There we go. If I wanted to be really super picky, I could trim this off just a little bit. But there we go. So, and it sometimes takes a little bit before these things will open up. And this is where I'm kind of wondering if maybe a narrower measuring tape wouldn't have quite so much hold as far as before it actually snaps open. But that is that. So I think these are so much fun. They're great stash busters. They just take absolutely no time to do. So lots of fun, lots of things to do with them. You could put earbuds in there. A friend of mine wants me to make her some because she's a photographer, and she has like the flash cards, and she transfers them from her studio to home all the time. And so yeah, so she wants some of these because then she can put this in her purse. She can just tuck it in there, throw that in her purse, and then they don't get dirty and linty and all of the stuff that happens in the bottom of her handbags. So that is as much work as there is to the little coin pocket for a little gratitude. For anyone who has made the gratitude, this is going to be very familiar. So again, this is my pleat chart. In the case of a little gratitude, we only need one piece, and we're going to work from both ends. So I'll kind of explain how that goes along here. So in cutting out your templates, just a hint, these two, this would be 11 inches wide, so I just cut the length, cut one sheet in half widthwise. So I guess, sorry, I should have put this way. So I cut it in half and then just used 5.5 inches and then cut all my different lengths. So you should be able to get all your templates out of one piece of cardstock. So again, just like we've done the accordion pleats, that's A, and then we're going to go to B. Nice and tight, pull these up against the template nice and tight. The cardstock is a really nice edge. I know lots have started cutting up little cutting mats from the dollar store. Whatever works for you. These things, judging by how the gratitude has gone, you'll be making lots of these. So that's the only two that we need to do for here. So A and B. Now what we're going to do to make this straightforward and easy, we're just going to flip this over. But we also have to then flip this over. So now we're going to work from this edge. So the next one is going to be C. And you can clip or pin this if you want, however you want to do it. The pleats should hold quite well. Even if they open up, you'll be all right. So again, nice and crisp against that edge. And just following along. This one is D. And one last with D. There we go. So I'm just going to kind of fold this back in together. Now, because this has been done a little bit differently, as opposed to having two pieces that you'll fold, then trim, then sew together, because we can do this all in one piece this way, sometimes things don't always work out exactly how you'd like, the measurements and stuff. It's not a big deal. So we're going to take this piece now, and we're just going to measure it against, this is the exterior. This is what I'm using for my exterior. So I can see I'm about 1/4 inch short here. No big deal, no panic. On this side where we just have the one pocket, really all this pocket is for putting some cash into. I've got a couple of card slots over here and a cash pocket over on this side. So because I do want this to match up, I don't want to mess around with my card slots because those are the right distance for actual cards. This side, it really doesn't matter. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this. I want to keep this part if I can. Nice and crisp. And I can feel that in the back, that's where things have changed a little bit. So my pocket isn't going to be quite as deep. Again, no panic, no big deal. And all I'm going to do is repress this. I can flip it over if I want to, or I can make this even longer. So I've actually, I guess you can see this now. Now I've kind of got two folds, or two creases. So I'm going to pull this up. So that is that. And so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch each of these, just the 3 edges. So I have all my top stitching done. Well, the 3 little edges that I have to do. Anyway, there's not an awful lot to this one. This one goes so quick you won't even believe it. The gratitude is fast enough, but this one is crazy. So I'm going to take, now I'm just going to even up my edges. That's all I'm going to be doing here. So I'm going to take about 1/8 of an inch off of the one side. Then I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to adjust it. Even though this side there's a whole lot more taken off, it really doesn't matter. I'll show you once I get this trimmed. What I'm going to look for is I'm going to make sure that my where I've top stitched, I'm just going to look through my ruler and make sure that my top stitching, like my edges and stuff like that, are fairly straight, and trim that off. So when I flip this over, I've got, yeah, I mean I'm narrower over here than over here. It doesn't make any difference. It honestly doesn't. And it still is out of my seam allowance for the most part anyway, and it'll all be good. The next step is our gussets. So in this case we actually do them 4 smaller pieces. So we're going to take these ones. It's fine, just center your interfacing in each of them. It doesn't have to be exact. Don't get too carried away, but eyeball it and center those. Then we're going to fold them in half the longest way, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance down both sides on all 4 of these. Once you have your gussets, the edges sewn, we're just going to turn those out. And just use my point turner, just kind of get those all poked out. I find if I go from one side to the other with my point turner, go from one side to the other with of the seam allowance, sometimes the bulk that ends up in the corner is actually just that the corner has folded a little bit. So if I can just kind of get all of those little folds flattened out, then I get nice corners. So a big bonus in this is that we don't have any interfacing in that seam allowance, so that makes it a lot thinner and helps it go a lot flatter. So I'm just using some clips to just clip my pleats in place here. Lots of pleats in place. Okay, so I've got everything just kind of held there anyway. What I want to do is I want to find my center. So I'm just going to fold this in half. Give it a little press. And I can just mark my center. Now I'm just going to mark with the purple disappearing ink pen. So now I have my center marked, and I'm going to measure up a 1/2 inch from my marks. And I can mark it, put a pin there, do whatever. So I'm going to do that on both sides. And that's going to give me my gusset placing. So now I have all of those placed, and I'm going to do a basting stitch all the way along both sides to hold everything in place. I'm going to do that at about an 1/8 of an inch. So just enough that it'll stay out of our seam allowance. I have my exterior and I have my lining, and I'm going to just flip this over, line up this edge, and again, oh, I guess I have my stitching done here. If you find that you're short on an edge, don't worry about it, unless you're really short. Just, you know, even if a 1/4 inch short, if you put an 1/8 of an inch on each edge, you're fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip the one side together. Going to do a stitch this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now you remember with if you've made the gratitude, this seam allowance was really important that it be less than a 1/4 inch, otherwise the card slots didn't work or your cards didn't fit. You've got a lot more room with this little one. Just the way that measurements work out and stuff, it's all good. So going to sew down this side, and then I'm going to pull this over, clip it, and I'm going to sew that as well. Now this one is smaller, so is quite small. It's smaller certainly than the gratitude is. So we're going to be very gentle as we're turning things out. I just love this natural cork with it's got a gold fleck to it, and then my lining has a bit of a gold metallic in it as well. So now we're just going to kind of flatten this out a little bit and get ready to put the Peltex inside. Okay, so now I have my piece of Peltex, and I'm just going to tuck this in. Sometimes it works best to fold it. And I'm just going to kind of move it around in there and get it laying flat. Get this positioned. I want it even this way as well. There, that looks pretty darn good to me. And I'm going to put an extra piece of Peltex along here so that it fills up. This is a little bit too thin for the clasp. So I'm just going to put that extra piece of Peltex in there. So it's going to be the width of my Peltex and 1/2 inch. I hate to keep referring back to the Gratitude wallet, but this is kind of helpful to me as well because I get to straighten out a few things. When I did the Gratitude video, I showed gluing everything all together. And then after I realized, you know what, that's not even how I do it. Somewhat, I know why I went wrong, because my intent was good, but it didn't dawn on me until after. So, okay, so now, and I'll explain what I'm talking about here. So this is going to fold this way. Now for myself, the reason why I've made this just a big pocket for putting some cash into is because the clasp that goes on the top here has that little tongue that sticks out. So trying to get around that to get a card in there, it makes no sense to have a card slot there. So just having one pocket down here that's fairly deep, you can just stick cash in there. Here in the front, I've got the 2 card slots, and these are big enough that you can put several cards in each one. So what happens is this is going to be the part that has the notch cut out of it because the hole is in the front. So this is the front of the wallet. Now, this is where the glue comes in. So where that clasp is going to go, where I'm going to be cutting that hole, I do need the layers glued together. So I'm going to get my glue here. I don't need to glue all the way along here. I just need to glue where I know that clasp is going to be. And it doesn't have to be precise, but I just want to get some glue in there. So now I've got that part glued. The next one. Now this is where I need my little filler piece. I'm going to tuck that in as well. Going to get that nice and evened up so that it's even this way. And I'm going to go in between there, and I'm going to put some glue in here as well, right in the center where that clasp again is going to be. So glue that together. The next thing I want to make sure that my fabric is glued as well. Oh, this is coming apart, but as soon as I put a little bit of pressure on here, it'll all go together. So again, just putting a light layer of glue there, and I can put a clip or something just to hold that in place. Now on the other side, and tuck that filler piece in, and here I've got some threads. So here all I'm going to do is I'm going to add about 1/8 of an inch or so, and I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I'm going to start in a little ways, and I'm just going to do a based stitch all the way across here. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side all the way across. This makes it so much easier to slide it into the clasp. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that on both ends. Okay, so now I've got just my basting stitch across the top and bottom, just to hold those extra Peltex pieces in place. Now, the next thing, I'm going to show you how to cut that hole for the clasp without using those little fancy cutters that we use, those little shape cutters. So I'm still going to need to figure out which is my front, which is my back. And once again, I know my card slots are actually going to be, when I open my wallet, there in the front. So I'm going to put my clasp on this side. So with no glue on or anything like that, I'm just dry fitting the clasp. Okay. Making sure that it's in there nice and tight. And now I'm going to mark this. Especially on the bottom, I want to get as close as I can. Bring that up for you. Get as close to the actual hole as possible. So I have an X-Acto knife. I also use it for my vinyl, so I guess that's why there's stuff stuck to it. But anyway, where am I here? There we go. So I have just an X-Acto knife, and I have a little ruler. And what I'm going to do, because I can get in there really, really well and I can see everything I'm doing, you can see here is my line. And I know I have not very much of a tolerance, but I want to be back just a tiny bit. So I want to make sure that I can see all of that line, so that my ruler, if that's making any sense, hopefully, that you can see that whole line that I've drawn. Now, I've tried to explain this, and I hope, writing it out is a little bit different when I'm messaging and stuff like that. But what we are concerned about is making sure that this cut right here does not get too deep, otherwise our hole will not cover it. But if we had to make this bigger, we don't really care about that because the clasp actually covers that completely. So hopefully that makes sense. Where's my clasp? So my hole this way, I only have a very small tolerance here, but if my cork inside was cut back to here and to here, or that's exaggerating, of course, it's going to cover it. You'll never see it because it's inside this hole. So I'm going to try to very carefully, without getting my head in the way here and still being able to see what I'm doing, I'm just going to cut through, and I think I've done it. So I can probably just also there we go. There. So I just needed to trim that out a little bit with a pair of scissors. If you don't have one of, a fancy little X-Acto knife, you can carefully do it with like a box cutter or something like that. So, and again, just gonna dry fit this. So there. So you can see it inside here. and I'm back from the hole on each side, but that doesn't even matter. So hopefully that clears things up and makes it a little bit easier for you, and not so scary as far as cutting that hole out goes. That's all you want to make sure is that you're down far enough that you can't see the fabric and Peltex and stuff peeking up through that hole, but not so far down that you've cut out at the bottom here. So easy peasy. We are right in the home stretch here. So actually, not that it matters, but so these would fold in, and again what we're going to do is we're just going to fold these back, and these are just going to come to the stitching line, and we're just going to press them. Okay, so yeah, we're going to do that with all 4 of them, fold them in. Be careful, use a pressing cloth or something like that so that you don't scorch, because now this is showing. We've got a little bit of an edge there with your leather, your cork, or your vinyl, especially vinyl. Cork and leather can take, sometimes can take a little bit of heat, but vinyl absolutely not. You touch it and that's it. All right, so I have these all pressed. We are so in the home stretch here. So I'm going to fold this, and actually these can just, now you can kind of pull them out to the side. There's actually no reason not to do this either with the gratitude. Make them more pieces. Instead of having just 2 pieces, you could do it like this, and then you don't have the bulk in the bottom here. But it's easier, in my opinion, to not have to cut all of those little pieces. So I can glue, no, sorry. No, don't glue, pin or clip. These edges. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to clip this in place, and I'm going to sew this with a 1/8 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to do that on both sides. And we're nearly there. So that's all I'm going to do. So all I've done is sewn these 2 together on each side. This just tucks in like that. Tuck our little coin wallet in there, and that's it. So now I can put, and you might want to just tuck these in. It's kind of like the gratitude as well. Tuck those in, leave it overnight. If you take this, leave this out and squish it, it'll train itself. You'll have these little accordion pleats will stay really well. And now all it is putting the hardware on, and it's done. So easy peasy. We're going to put a little bit of glue in the channel. Enough that there's it can grab onto the cork and the fabric, but not so much that it's gushing out everywhere. So here I'm careful. I don't run it, I'm not pushing it all the way in and running it along, otherwise my glue will squish out. So I'm just kind of carefully getting it in there, and you can see I'm still away from the edge, so I haven't really touched any glue yet even. Making sure everything is, I'm also looking that it's centered here, and just gently pushing this on. And if I need anything, if I need to persuade anything to go in, generally using like a bone folder or something along that line just will compress things down and just help you ease it in. So want to make sure there I've caught the outside So I'm just going to ease that in. Go from side to side and make sure that's in there nice and tight. So that's the one side. I stay back about a 1/4 inch or so from the edge so I don't have glue squishing out the sides. You can see I've got there, just a matter of working it a little bit. That works. So now I'm going to put my screws in. Before I get into actually putting the screws in, I'm going to talk again about, this is called Permatex, this is Thread Locker, and this brand happens to be Permatex, but there's different ones. It's liquidy, but this one is just got it's a little bit more like a really thin glue. Lots of them come in blue bottles, so but they are not the same. So this one is actually the blue thread lock. So it doesn't say on this one. The little bottles, it'll say right on there, blue, medium strength. So there's also red, that is maximum, I think, and this band I believe would probably be red on it. So it says on here as well that it's removable. The blue medium strength is not like a glue. The red stuff I think is like crazy glue. It'll stick your fingers together. It's a maximum strength. We don't need that necessarily for hardware. What this does is it dries very rubbery. So it does not allow the threads to turn back out. So it doesn't let your screws and stuff like that work themselves out. But if you need to remove them, you can. So this is going to be in the automotive section where adhesives and that kind of stuff, not where you would typically find glue. So, and what I do, instead of trying to put my thread lock in the holes, because that's just about impossible, I'm going to go in here. Whoops, got a little carried away here. What I do instead is I just put it on a piece of paper towel, and I'm just going to put a little bit, and it's okay, whatever rolls off is fine. Now if I was using the full or the maximum strength stuff, I certainly would not be doing this. I can actually pick these up because it just ends up being kind of like a rubber coating, and if it dries completely, that's just fine too. It doesn't make any difference because it still will work. And I'm gonna go pan out here again. So all I'm going to do, now I have not really had much problem with stripping screws. Watch, now that I say that, I'll have problems, but if you get them in the hole straight, then typically they don't strip out. So I can get this onto my little screwdriver here. And if they don't seem to be going in straight, or if you can't seem to get them started, then turn it backward until you feel a little bit of a click, and that's the threads where they start. If it clicks, then you can turn it, and usually that's exactly where the thread is going to start turning into each other, connecting. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Well, I do. That's why you're watching me. And these we just want to turn till they're flush. You can screw them right through the hardware if you're not careful, because there's nothing to stop it. And if you have a hard time getting them to go through the materials that you're using, then just poke them with an awl would work well, or some people will just use their seam ripper and just kind of poke a hole and get that going. I don't seem to have a problem, so I just do what works, and that's what you need to do too. I'll give you some hints, do the best I can there, but if you have a method that works for you, stick with it. And there you go. There is a little gratitude. And just pull this out. Open for your coins, pour them out, and away you go. This one is so quick, you're gonna just you're gonna take off with these, and you're gonna be making them for everybody. They're just a cute little, just a little wallet. They're just adorable.